We have a sad day today. We have to say goodbye to the Mustang GT here behind me, and before we say goodbye, I'm gonna take it for a little bit of a joyride. I got all the permissions I need, lucky me. So I'm gonna take it for a joyride, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about Carroll Shelby and the reason why the Mustang became such a household brand or name brand in the automotive industry. So yeah, let's take a bit of a drive. Don't know is that the Mustang was initially a failure. It didn't do too well with marketing and with sales, and this was because of the engine. It was a horrible engine. And so Lee Iacocca, who was one of the marketing directors at Ford at the time, he was looking for someone to take the helm to build a better performance version of the Mustang. Now the person he asked was Carroll Shelby. Before we get into this whole story with how the Mustang became so popular, we need to go into the history of Carroll Shelby first.
I guess fast cars have always been an important part of my life. I started driving them on dirt tracks down in Texas. And after a while, I worked my way up to sport car driving. That was it for me. The sport car circuits with their constantly changing conditions offer the challenge, the kicks I was after.
This man was a legend. So he was born in 1923, and he was quite a sickly child growing up. But because he couldn't do sports like football and all those other kind of sports, he got an interest in racing and with vehicles, and he started with go-karts, and he was a brilliant racer as well.
When I was 4 or 5 years old, I used to ride around with him and stand up on the floorboard on the right side and go, "Faster, Daddy." I loved it, and my father loved cars too.
Eventually, after racing for so long, he ended up racing for Aston Martin. Now, obviously, Aston Martin is a big brand name, and he did very well and raced in Le Mans, which he won. But unfortunately, he had a heart condition, so he was forced to stop. But he was crazy enough to race his last race with a nitroglycerine tablet under his tongue. While Carroll Shelby was racing and climbing the ranks in the racing world, he raced for the likes of Aston Martin, but also Ferrari and Maserati. And during this time, he picked up a lot of skills and knowledge in the garages of these brand names and racing teams. Now, the other thing about his time as a racer is that he raced an Allard, which was basically the precursor of the Cobra. He saw the potential of this vehicle and the body of this vehicle and the chassis, and while that was going on in Europe, in America, people were driving things that could only be described as Landships. They were massive, with big, massive engines and power. So they were used to power and muscle cars. So what Shelby wanted to do is he wanted to combine the European chassis with the modern at the time and more powerful muscle engines. Now, before Lee Iacocca approached him, Shelby was actually busy looking for people or looking for manufacturers to produce this vehicle, his dream vehicle, the one he had in mind. And he first approached Chevrolet and GM Motors. And due to some politics and the CEO of GM not liking the designer of that he chose, they eventually broke that deal and it never went through. So luckily, Shelby had a plan B, and he went to Ford and AC Motors, and he kind of played them against each other, and eventually both of them agreed.
First, the AC car company in England badly needed a new engine. They produced a good basic chassis and body, but had no engine source. On the other hand, Ford Motor Company over here was just in the development stage of a promising new high-performance engine. Well, after a lot of talking, I got a hold of some bodies from the AC people, and Ford agreed to help me build a new sport car I call the Cobra.
By April of 1962, the prototype was ready, and it was called the CSX 2000. But they needed funding to produce the vehicle, and of course, to have funding, you need to sell vehicles, and they haven't sold any vehicle at this point so far. So what Shelby did was something brilliant. He took the one vehicle, took it to many different journalists and publications, and he kept repainting the vehicle a different color, so it gave the impression that they're a big time car manufacturing company and they have multiple vehicles. So eventually they got the funding and they produced the AC Cobra not too long after that. Now at the same time, having a vehicle is one thing, but having that vehicle perform really well is another. Now the AC Cobra at the time didn't perform too well in the beginning and it has some issues. So in 1963 they upgraded the engine, gave it more power and better handling, and over the years they did better and better and better on the racetrack.
Ford-powered Cobras beat just about everything in sight to win the U.S. Road Racing Championship in 1963. In 1964, we took our first crack at the World Road Racing Championship with a new coupe body of our own design and a race-proved Ford engine. We took our new Ford-powered Cobra across the pond. And for the first time in a long time, Europe saw American race cars winning. We didn't take the World's Championship the first year, but we sure gave Mr. Ferrari something to think about.
After that winning streak, Shelby already solidified his name. But let's fast forward to the Mustang. Now, when the Mustang initially sold, as I said, they didn't do too well. What Lee Iacocca knew they had to do is they needed to boost the power. So that is exactly what they did. They asked Shelby to build them a performance version of the Mustang.
We've got a couple of new entries in our stable this year. The new Mustang-based GT350 and the first American car of its kind, the new Ford GT. This GT350 is a racing version of Ford's Mustang 2+2. We set the cars up for racing by installing special components, racing shocks and so on. We're doing a lot of testing as well.
This Mustang's got some serious power. It's got a V8 under the hood, obviously, and a 5-liter at that. So when you put foot down, let me just go around the corner here. Yo, that sounds amazing. How nice is that? I don't know if you can obviously not hear that on the video, but that is such a nice sound. Okay, so I pulled over. Anver's going to do me a favor. He's going to drive up and drive past the camera just to give you an idea of what the sound is of this vehicle.
I have a lot of heroes, people that I look up to, but it's people that I look up to, a lot of different ones for different reasons. Because when you really get down to it, not any of us can do everything. A lot of people I run into think they can do everything. But I think the most important thing that I've ever learned is learn what you can't do. And that's the thing that I try to live by and not try to overreach. I tried to overreach a lot of times in my life, but if you know what you can't do, you won't go too far wrong.